Time to set foot inside the morgue with your hosts, Lee, Carl, and Rob.
These last forests are once beautiful nature. In the hope that they will one day return and grace our power.
Hello, welcome to episode 6 of the Manchester Morgue podcast. Tonight we're doing Silent Running, 1972. We thought we'd start off with a little bit where we talk about what we've been watching. So, Rob, what have you been watching recently?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of films. One, highs and lows with me as usual. I saw a Chinese epic martial arts film called Double World, which apparently was massive budget last year, but they've not made anything back because of Corona and lockdown. And some of the fight sequences in it are incredible. It's about a Chinese warlord who wants all the clans of China to come together for this giant battle. Yeah, there's some amazing sequences in it. It's completely implausible and laughable and very Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, people flying around on cables. But it's so much fun. And then I watched something truly awful. I watched Friday the 13th part. I think it's 7 or 8. Jason Takes Manhattan.
Part 8.
And did he take Manhattan?
Yeah, he doesn't take Manhattan. He floats around on a boat and kills a lot of stupid teenagers. In the first couple of minutes, there's an 80s boob scene, which little me would have liked, and little me still liked actually.
So it's basically Jason on a boat, on a boating lake.
I will say this for the film, because some people said it was one of the worst, but it's like so bad it's good in parts. There is it's got some of the killings are quite funny. There's a boxer. I won't ruin it for people, but there's a boxing sequence which is hilarious. I didn't stop laughing for about 10 minutes. So Jason Takes Manhattan. That's my watch. So, what about you guys? What have you been watching?
I've seen a couple of things. I'd just like to add that Friday the 13th Part 8, although it's very hokey, it's certainly not the worst in the series. I think that accolade probably belongs to Part 7, which is the New Blood, which is that bad. I don't really remember anything from it. But 8, yeah, and apparently the 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, was all filmed in Toronto as well, in Canada. So it actually wasn't filmed in Manhattan either. And he doesn't go there, so it's kind of a double kind of con, really. What have I watched? I watched on iPlayer, BBC iPlayer last week, was the Shining, which I've not seen for about 15, 20 years. It was the UK version, so it's just under 2 hours. There's the US version is about 2.5 hours, something like that. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I don't think I'd realised before, having watched it before, that it's actually a film about. I thought it was a film about the mum. The mum character. She's trying to hold everyone together and pull everything together. And of course, Jack Nicholson's going mad.
Have you read the book?
I haven't. No, that's what I'd like to read. Actually, give that a try. Because the film is good, but I think it's weighed down a little bit having Jack Nicholson in the lead, because he can't really ever escape from being Jack Nicholson. Instead of being, you don't really ever believe that he's a tortured kind of writer who's got this job at this hotel. He's being Jack Nicholson. Whereas I thought the film's kind of very much about the mum, played by Shelley Duvall, and she's got the son who can see disturbing things, the Shining. So she's kind of got him. She's trying to hold him together, but also she's trying to kind of keep reeling her husband back into sanity, and ultimately she fails.
And there's a hilarious meme going around with Shelley Duvall, because there's lots of screaming in that film. With her mouth wide open, she's got like one of those hot pockets in her mouth.
Oh yeah. Oh, I've not seen that one. I thought I wouldn't mind watching the extended version, which I think you can get on Blu-ray. But I've never seen that one. It's always been the UK cut. It's
one of those films that I tend to revisit every 5 or 6 years. Really, it's one of my favourites. I always go.
I do like it. It's one I will still stare at people and go, red ram.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Have you seen the what is it, Doctor Sleep? The recent one with Ewan McGregor. Yeah, it was okay.
Haven't seen that either.
I read the book for that. I mean, the book is not as strong as the Shining book. but it does get a little bit more deeper into the idea of the power of the shining. The films don't really get across that well. It's like he doesn't get across in the film the idea that the hotel is completely merging with the Jack character. You don't quite, like you said, because it's Jack Nicholson, and Jack Nicholson always plays everything heightened up anyway, doesn't he? But
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah. And the other one I saw was a slasher film from 1980 called Terror Train with Jamie Lee Curtis that I thoroughly enjoyed and would recommend to anyone really. It was one of those films that just completely passed me by. It's a slasher film. It's from 1980. It's set on a train with Jamie Lee Curtis. And how have I missed that one all these years?
Yeah, it sounds like a good combination.
Yeah, and bizarrely, it's got David Copperfield in one of the main roles as, yes, you guessed it, the magician. So it's got that kind of added pull as well, if that's your kind of thing. So yeah, I've been keeping it kind of horror last couple of weeks. I think it must be the Halloween kind of vibes in the air. And Lee, have you been casting your critical eye over anything lately?
Truth Seekers on Amazon Prime, which is Nick Frost and Simon Pegg. It's kind of like IT Crowd meets Shaun of the Dead, but I like it because it's quite understated. Throw a lot of really funny lines. They throw them away almost because it's got the idea of somebody having a sideline in the paranormal investigations, and it's kind of taking the mick out of everybody's got like a bit of a sideline these days, haven't they? Everybody's got a podcast, everybody's got a YouTube.
Everyone's things on the side. This is our ticket to fame and fortune, you guys. Don't knock it. You know what I mean?
We'll be selling merchandise soon.
Yeah, you know it. They'll be wearing t-shirts and everything.
And the only other thing really was Nebraska, which was another Bruce Dern film. I thought I'd widen my knowledge of Bruce, and that's really good. He got an Oscar nominee for that film, and he plays like a stubborn dad who's had a spam letter that says you've won $1 million, and he decides he's going to walk to this town that's about 60 miles away. And it's a road trip movie with father and son road trip movie.
Yeah, it's got Will Forte in it as well, hasn't it?
It's quite heartwarming, and so that's it. Yeah.
Great.
So should we move on to the movie? We're going to change things around a little bit. Rather than describe the movie line by line, I'm going to read out a summary of the plot. The first thing we get is a close-up macro shots of the flora and fauna of the forest and its inhabitants, which include a snail, turtle, and a naked Freeman Lowell, played by Bruce Dern, who's skinny dipping in a tropical forest stream. Set in a future where, somewhat implausibly, all plant life on Earth has become extinct, for reasons unknown, Earth's last remaining forests and assortment of animals have been packed into biodomes aboard several spaceships and blasted towards Saturn. One of these spacecrafts, the Valley Forge, is the setting for the movie and home to 4 human crew, 3 maintenance robot drones. Lowell is the ship's botanist, ecologist and medic who looks after the plants and animals in the dome, so one day the forest can return to refoliate the industrialized barren Earth. After 8 years, the crew receives a radio transmission ordering them to abandon the mission, nuke the domes for some unknown reason, and return the ships to Earth. Lowell is absolutely horrified by this. After witnessing the glee of his crewmates blowing up 4 of the drones, he decides to save the remaining forests. He kills one of the crew in a fight, and then he jettisons and blows up the other 2 whilst they're inside the dome, just for good measure. He's then left isolated alone with 3 drones, or 3 toasters as Rob calls them, for company, which he names Huey, Louie and Dewey. He reprograms a robot to treat his leg, which he damaged in the fight. The ship travels dangerously through Saturn's rings, killing the unfortunate Louis, who gets sucked off by Saturn.
Sucked off by Saturn.
Yeah.
Into the storm.
Yeah. There's worse ways to go.
Yeah. And Lowell reprograms the 2 remaining drones to plant trees and play poker with him, but his mental health begins to deteriorate further. Whilst manically driving a buggy, he accidentally runs over Huey and is unable to fully repair him, and the somewhat depressed and confused Lowell takes his eye off the ball and the forest starts dying, much to his horror. He doesn't understand how this is happening, even though he's a botanist. But it turns out to be a lack of sunlight. Who would have thought that when it would be a problem when orbiting Saturn?
GCSE photosynthesis.
Yeah. And he sets up a series of lights to rectify the issue, but when the control manages to track down Valley Forge, he knows the game's up and his crime will be discovered. He decides to eject the remaining dome with Dewey on board looking after it, while he and the damaged Huey remain on the Valley Forge, which Lowell blows up with a nuclear bomb, committing the ultimate sacrifice. And the last scene is of Silent Run is the drone drifting off into space with Huey on his own, holding a watering can.
A kid's watering can, yeah.
Yeah, it was his deceased daughter's watering
Yeah.
can, Bruce Dern's, for possibly seemingly eternity. The credits roll to the warbling of hippie folk singer Joan Baez, which I know you particularly enjoyed, Rob.
Yeah.
I must say, before we launch into it, I am obviously a huge fan of this film. But everybody I've seen who's a fan of this film always says they saw it as a child, which I did. It was a film that was shown in the 1980s quite a bit on BBC. I think back when BBC Two used to show quite a few early evening films. So I am a bit biased, but
they used to have Star Trek on, didn't they? And occasional kind of science fiction films, maybe like Spider-Man, the old Spider-Man movies from the 70s they put on in that time slot. I can imagine it being run there.
Yeah, it was probably around the time that was just after Star Wars, really, sort of mid-80s. So, yeah, I think anything with a cute drone, a cute robot in it was much sought after by the programmers.
Its message, "Save the trees," is about as subtle as a sledgehammer, is it? We have to say that. I mean, even the opening song, which I'm not a big fan of Joan Baez. I love Bob Dylan, and I know Bob Dylan had a bit of time in her company for a while, but when her soprano shrill voice comes in at the beginning, I was loving the visuals, by the way. I mean, this film, we have to say this, still looks quite mildly impressive if you consider it's 1972. It's like, but the opening, when her voice comes in, it kind of like, for me, that voice, that soprano, the shrill voice, and is really screaming, pitchy, and she was singing about forests and trees, and yeah, it's not subtle, but it's.
I was saying to you, earlier, Rob, that apparently she'd just come off a world tour, so she was absolutely exhausted. I think even the director said it was a little bit more shrill than he was expecting. I don't think all the songs are quite as shrill as that, but I know there's a lot of fans of this soundtrack. I think they released a green vinyl version of it, which is quite sought after, and I know. Mark Commode's a big fan of the film. I think he sort of says he sticks on this soundtrack just to relax in the evening. So there are fans of it. But Carl, what did you think of the opening bit?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't find. I'm not really a fan of Joan Baez by any means, but then I don't think the songs really detracted too much. I mean, it seemed to fit in quite nicely with the theme of the film, from what I could gather. The first song she sings is called "Gather Your Children" or something like that, and it kind of just it lays out what the film's all about. I think so. It's quite well placed. It does it without kind of too much exposition. You know, putting a Joan Baez song in there actually probably saves them quite a bit of storytelling time, I think.
I think the director, Douglas Trumbull, said he wanted it to portray a sense of a lost loved one or some sorrowful vibe to the film. So I think it certainly portrays that, doesn't it?
She's got that mournful quality to her voice, hasn't she? A bit like a Karen Carpenter style. But it's just
it's not everybody's cup of tea.
No, it's not. No, it's. But as I said, I mean, but then I was enjoying. I mean, it's going to become obvious as we talk later. I'm not a big fan, but I do enjoy the opening sequence. It's really puts you in the place. You're ready to roll.
And Rob, you mentioned. Sorry, Rob. I was going to say you mentioned the special effects. And I was looking at the special effects. I mean, I was watching it on. I watched it on Prime last night, and you can tell you can tell they're models. Having said that, that I think the storytelling's of such a quality that I can appreciate the artistry that's gone into the making of the models. And you can kind of let it go. And I appreciate at the time the effects were probably top of the range. And I know this film was probably not as high budgeted as something like 2001, which probably cost quite a lot more. Although Trumbull was involved with both.
I think it was part of, I don't know if you heard, but Universal, after the success of Easy Rider came out of nowhere on a very low budget to be a success, they decided to commission 5 films to up and coming, kind of unknown directors almost, and the proviso would be that the budget would be kept to under $1 million, and the studio would have very little interference with the films. So I think there was a number of. This was one of them. I
Right.
think American Graffiti was the last one. The Last Movie, I think, was another one. Dennis Hopper.
Yeah, and I think the directors were given like final cut as well. I think without any kind of studio interference, because such was the confidence that the success of Easy Rider had kind of garnered. Because I think what happened in Hollywood around that time was there were lots of really big budgeted musicals. There was a slew of them in like 1968, 69, and they'd all cost a fortune, and they'd all completely failed to make their money back. Like ones like Hello Dolly and Paint Your Wagon and Dr. Dolittle, and lots of kind of big cinematic films. People weren't going to see them anymore. Then Easy Rider came along, which was shot for very little indeed, almost like a home movie, perhaps.
Yeah.
And, it made an absolute fortune and completely changed the culture of filmmaking.
Killer soundtrack, that film as well.
Yeah, that helped. That always helps, doesn't it? I think they got lots of the contemporary bands from the time on the soundtrack for that, like the Byrds and Steppenwolf, and yeah, of course. And I think, I can't remember what the other films were, Lee, from the five that you mentioned. There's another one called
The Last Movie, American. Yeah, I can't remember the other.
Last Movie's Dennis Hopper, who was involved with Easy Rider. I think there's one called The Hired Hand, which is Peter Fonda. It's like a Western that he made. American Graffiti, and this one, Silent Running, and another one, which I can't remember.
I think this was the only one to make no money, to be honest. But apparently they didn't throw any money behind the marketing. I think it had a few quarter-page adverts in the New York Times, but and I think it was also a victim at the time of The Godfather came out at a similar time as well. I think it had quite a decent amount of competition at the time.
Yeah, that probably bulldozed everything that was everything else that was out, wouldn't it? And I wonder, Lee, you said that this film has an interesting Italian title. I wonder if its lack of success in the US was a reason for this. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, in Italy, they marketed it as the 2002 Space Odyssey, so almost like a sequel to 2001.
I must say, if I'd have seen 2001 and then been an Italian film fan and thought, oh yeah, va bene, and then going to the cinema to watch 2002, I think I would have been I'd certainly been surprised, because tonally, I think the films there are some similarities, but they're very, very different. I think, if anything, 2001 is kind of cinematic experience, pure cinematic experience. And I think I was just going to call it 2002 then. I think Silent Running is, to me, it's got the feel, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but like Steven Spielberg's Duel came along a couple of years later that was actually made for TV, the film about the car and the truck that's chasing it throughout the film. I felt this could have been like, a really, really good made-for-TV movie from that era.
Douglas Trumbull described it as really a guy with 3 dogs in the wilderness. It's a very different, he wanted it to make a human movie about with real people, emotions, and flawed characters. So, the only similarity with 2001 really is Douglas Trumbull worked on the special effects for 2001, and Kubrick refused to give anybody else credits for special effects, but he did have a big part to play in the special effects for that, so he was known for that. But he'd never directed a movie before. This was his first one.
No.
I think he had quite an experienced crew with him, didn't he? His cinematographer was quite experienced, Charles Wheeler.
Yeah.
Even the writers weren't that experienced at the time. They went on to do great things with The Deer Hunter, I think.
Yeah, Michael Cimino. I didn't realise he'd written this, and this must have been one of his really early writing gigs, because the only one I was aware of that he'd written before he started directing was, I think he's got a writing credit on Magnum Force, the second Dirty Harry film, which came out after this year. Yeah. And I think he did rewrites on the first one, but he didn't get credited. So this must have been one of his kind of, jobbing. I don't know if it was a rewrite for him or if he'd come up with a story. But he's there. He is on the in the credits at the start of the film.
The film, though, has a massive tonal shift on it from the first 20 minutes, I find, to what the film becomes. Because we're going to say spoiler, but we've already said in the summary at the beginning, in the first 20 minutes, you introduce to Lowell, and he's the ecologist on the ship, and he's looking after tending after his plants and trees. He's mocked, isn't he, pretty much by his other crewmates, the other three crewmates.
It's kind of it's a gentle mocking, but
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. That
Yeah.
he's mocked, no question.
They're like idiot jocks, and he makes that CG. He's already plays it. I mean, Bruce Dern plays it pretty nutside from the beginning, doesn't he falls out with them over the slightest mispronunciation of words, or if they don't love the trees as much as him. And and to really hammer home the fact is that these guys are idiots. They have them like jetting around on these little go-kart things around the
Yeah.
around the forest, don't they? And like crushing plants and veg and stuff.
I don't understand what their purpose is. They don't seem
I
to
don't.
even know. They're not too confident of how those nuclear bombs work later on in the movie, are they? One of them nearly
No.
like presses the detonator at one point. And like you say, yeah, they're racing around on these buggies. They're running over his plants. He's probably had 8 years of this. He's probably
Yeah,
been driven to
he's
the brink, hasn't he?
and he plays cards with them, and our hero, our protagonist, Lowell, is a bit of a card shark, isn't he? Because he wins, but he wins in a really bad temper. Like the other guys are more like playing the
Yeah.
game, and he wins, but with a real snarl to him.
He's got that cheap visor, hasn't he, on it?
Oh yeah.
He's like the dealer's
Yes.
visor.
He's just to really hammer home the fact is that the other guy's hairs have all been brushed, and our friend Lowell, his hair is pretty wild all the way through, isn't it? It's like there's no hairspray gone on that. There's no brush gone through it. It's
I think that might just be Bruce Dern's hair. Every movie I've seen him in, he looks a bit like that. Right?
he just looks so unkempt. It's
Dishevelled.
amazing. Yeah, he's really dishevelled, and I love I do love the fact is I was saying this to Lee before we started recording tonight that when we're introduced to his favourite forest has got rabbits, eagles, and owls as well. So let's talk about the food cycle on this. I'd like to know the food chain on this his little forest. How do you keep on keeping the rabbits going? Because obviously. Yeah, we would have to worry about those small complexities. But anyway, going back to the sea change thing, like in the first 20 minutes, this is the scene set. So we know he's building up in tension. And when they get the big order to blow the forest, they're all delighted. And I was thinking about this. I mean, why would they be delighted? They're preserving the last forest on Earth. I know they want to go
Yeah.
home, but they keep on talking about how terrible. Well, actually, they don't say Earth is terrible. They say Earth has become almost
Yeah, they're kind of arguing for Earth, aren't they? They're saying
yeah.
everybody's got a job, Lowell. Everybody's there's no disease or very
It's
little
warm,
disease. I
isn't
think
it?
say,
It's
yeah,
supposed
it's
to be
nice and
warm
warm.
and pleasant, but obviously things can't survive, and that's the other big criticism of the film, isn't it? If they can build these domes and stick them on the side of a ship and send a ship into space, why can't the domes live on Earth? But then you came back with me when I said that to you that maybe there's like falling debris in the sky which smashes the domes, and
Yeah, I mean, I think I can see the reason why. I can see the reason why that the domes are in space. I cannot see the reason why they are orbiting Saturn. I think that was literally Douglas Trumbull wanted to pull off the Saturn special effects that they
yeah.
couldn't work out how to do in 2001.
2001 does Jupiter, doesn't it? So
Jupiter, yeah, but
same
Saturn was
way.
the original destination, and he basically by 72 he'd worked out how to do it. So, and also the original script was very different. It was supposed to be Lowell was supposed to be a much older character, which might relate to why he has very little to return to Earth for, and the other three are quite infused about returning
Yeah,
to the
he's
families and the girlfriends, and he doesn't seem to have anybody back home, does he? Really, he doesn't have any pictures of anybody back home.
He's asked later on towards the end of the film if he's got anyone at home, and he replies that he hasn't. So yeah, maybe that's a kind of a legacy from the earlier version of the story.
He makes the very quick choice, doesn't he, between trees and people, and he chooses trees. But maybe this is his madness to defend the film. In the plot, he chooses trees, but obviously the inevitability of his plight by running away and not starving the trees of daylight, and what they'll need, and eventually he will have to die, and the robots will eventually have no one to maintain it. So it's completely fruitless, his task, isn't it? Because all these forests will die unless they are returned to Earth to be preserved. But I suppose maybe he is mad. Maybe he's completely lost.
There were a lot of statements made by the film. What I got from it was all the characters seem a little bit like high school children, don't they? They seem almost like teenage, like chewing gum, racing around on go-karts, aren't they?
Yeah.
And very little and everybody back home on Earth seems to have like no responsibilities. And even Bruce Dern's a bit of a nerd, and I wonder if it's kind of making a statement in the future. Everybody's going to be man children, and the drones are going to do all the chores.
It's the age-old argument that we're losing connection with the Earth itself, aren't we? That basically we're all everything's automated now, everything's pre-packaged and done. We don't need to think, we don't need to work with the land, get soil under our fingers. He makes that really impassioned speech, doesn't it?
Look at that stuff. How can you guys sit there and really say anything to me about this? Look at this crap. Look at that. Dried synthetic crap. And you've become so dependent on it that I bet you can't even live without it.
What do we want, Lowell?
Don't you realize how pitiful that is, what you just asked me? On Earth, everywhere you go, the temperature is 75 degrees. Everything is the same. All the people are exactly the same. Now, what kind of life is that?
Lowell, if it's so rotten, why do you want to go back?
Because it's not too late to change it.
What do you want, Lowell? I mean, there's hardly any more disease, there's no more poverty. Nobody's out of a job.
That's right. Every time we have the argument, you say the same thing to me. You give me the same three answers all the time. The same thing. Well, everybody has a job. That's always the last one. But you know what else there is no more of, my friend? There is no more beauty. And there's no more imagination. And there are no frontiers left to conquer. And you know why? Only one reason why. One reason why. The same attitude that you three guys are giving me right here in this room today. And that is, nobody cares. Look on the wall behind you. Look at that little girl's face. I know you've seen it. But you know what she's never going to be able to see? She's never going to be able to see the simple wonder of a leaf in her hand. Because there's not going to be any trees. What do you think about that?
About the importance of trees and nature and hurt and pain and the fact there's different weather and raindrops falling on your face and stuff. That's the big message, isn't it? And that message is repeated quite often. But like you said, yeah, I agree with you. They're all like a bunch of jocks, aren't they? They're playing pool.
Yeah, it's like jocks versus nerds, isn't it, almost on the first bit? And I think also is it making a statement that ultimately, if we continue on the course we're on, is it going to lead to eco-terrorism? Because he's kind of like the first eco-terrorist, isn't he? He's not, obviously we value human life over everything else, and he does commit the ultimate sin, doesn't he, in taking a human life.
He is like he's like the Greenpeace whaling boats, isn't he? But on a floating ship.
The first killing, when he commits the first killing of his colleague, I think it seems to be somewhat accidental because they're having a scuffle, yes, but I think in the heat of the scuffle, he manages to kind of kill him. I think it's more of an accidental kind of note. And I think it's possibly that act that then triggers him to think, okay, well, I have to act now. I can't. I've kind of gone and done this now. I need to go and act.
The French would call it a crime of passion, wouldn't they? Really, and then
certainly,
the rest of the killings is more covering up for his original sin, isn't it?
He said that original fight. That's when he gets wounded, doesn't it? And it's like really stark. I don't know about the version of the film you watched, but the blood is really red, isn't it?
It's very, very early 70s, Dirty Harry kind of bright red blood. But there's quite a lot of it. It's when he opens up when he gets the drone to kind of perform a surgery on him.
That was actually a fake leg because Bruce Dern would not trust. Douglas Trumbull was operating that cutting tool, but he would not trust that cutting tool anywhere near his leg.
That's hilarious.
Do you blame him? Because if let's get onto these robots. These robots are like a little wobbly square thing with legs, and they don't have arms, do they? They have legs, and they have like a little prod thing which comes out, a little pincer. And because of the the technology, and also the fact is they were operated by quadriplegic actors, weren't they? Inside
bilateral amputees. Yeah.
So those it's wobbly as anything when it's operating on his leg. There's no way I'd let that anywhere near me. And there's a scene in the film later where, or is it earlier, where one of these wobbly robots stacks pool balls because in the future you play pool where the balls are stacked vertically. And it takes forever. It's like it's really slow, and it's like
I don't know. Was that the one with the huge robot? They had like a huge car robot arm, didn't they? And apparently there was going to be a big scene where all the drones would play pool together, but they basically ran out of time to do that scene, so they settled for the card game instead
Yeah.
as a cheaper option.
Yeah, he trains the robots, doesn't he, how to play cards, how to play poker, because
Yeah, he becomes a computer programmer as well. Yeah, and he's quite a talented guy, really. Yeah, but not a very good botanist.
he's a terrible botanist, but he's a good card hand. He's a card shark, and he's a good killer actually, because he kills quite swiftly. He kills the
Pretty
first one.
swiftly. Yeah.
Rob, sorry, Lee, you mentioned the Bruce Dern character. Sorry, Bruce Dern not trusting the special effects with his actual leg, so that he wouldn't kind of drill through his bone. One story I read was that Douglas Trumbull's special effects team was made up of like his students. So I mean, I'm not I don't know if these guys were getting paid or were had relevant experience themselves, because it was Trumbull's first directorial job. And so I wonder if that kind of played into it as well. He's like, oh, hang on a minute. It's like having student doctors operate on you.
They did have his dad, Don Trumbull, who'd worked on The Wizard of Oz, and it was an old hand. He'd worked on special effects for many years. So I think he created the go-karts. He did the transmission for those, and I think he was helping out on. And he kind of brought his dad back into the movie industry because he'd been outside of the industry for a while. So
Yes.
It wasn't all novices, but yeah, you're right. It was. They did have college kids working on it as well. Yeah,
And
I love the go-karts. Yeah.
The go-karts are cool. In fact, it made me think, because one of his students, the second in the credits at the end, the second build special effects guy after Trumbull, is a chap called John Dykstra, and John Dykstra actually went on from this to do special effects for things like Star Wars and also Battlestar Galactica, which came at the end of the series, and that makes lots of use of these kind of big indoor sets that kind of look for a TV show. I said it had quite a kind of look of maybe a movie made for TV. Also, Battlestar Galactica used footage from Silent Running in quite a few episodes, because one of the ships in the Battlestar Galactica fleet is the agricultural ship of theirs. And of course, whenever they had an episode that involved it, they would use the footage of the domes from Silent Running. I don't know if they use the same sets. It looks similar inside as well. I don't know if it's exactly the same set as a few years later. But yeah, John Dykstra went on and, basically Galactica took this entire idea of having a big forest in space, and they kind of incorporated it into their plots and used the footage as well.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of that with the movie. A lot of the people who worked on the movie went on to do great things. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I think Douglas Trumbull worked on that. I think he was even asked by George Lucas to do the special effects for Star Wars, but refused it. I mean, he must regret that decision.
Oh, is that right? I thought he'd done Star Wars. Or maybe I'll check it out. But yeah, maybe I know he did.
Yeah, in the interview on the Blu-ray, there's an interview with him. Yeah, and he whether it was true or not, but George Lucas also asked him permission to use R2-D2, which was obviously very similar to the drones.
I think if he'd been involved, R2-D2 would have been a toaster. and what would C-3PO over? God, he would have filed. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's still, like you said earlier, Carl. It does, you can blatantly see the models, but they're very well made models, aren't you? You can forgive that. It's like I said to Lee before we started tonight that there's even a big budget film which always sticks in my head a bad model is the Superman film. When he reverses time, is that Superman 2 or 1? 2, isn't it?
It's 1. I think it's the first one. Yeah.
When he reverses time, there's a model of a rocks stopping a flood.
Yes.
And it's like all these loose rocks in a canyon. And every time, even as a kid, I used to watch it. That used to so take me out of the film. It was that one sequence I thought, please don't have that sequence. And it looks awful. It looks like, it honestly looks like somebody's just turned the tap on. And then they've just thrown a few paper mache rocks in a and I didn't feel that in this film. I'm not a fan, but it didn't bother me, the models. I thought the models were decent, and I was involved.
Yeah, I thought there's a scene later on where he's out on the outside of the ship, and this garnered some criticism, didn't it? Because they're saying that the materials used for this really kind of thin spacesuit that he's out in space.
It was just a diving suit, wasn't it?
it would have just been pulled
and
apart.
a bicycle helmet. Yeah, obviously you'd be blown apart in seconds in reality, but they were working within a budget and in time scales and everything. But I thought some of the effects. I've seen some criticism of the Saturn effects. Really, some people sort of saying, "Well, why is there a wind while he's going through the rings of Saturn?" But I quite enjoyed the psychedelic section of the film, and unfortunately, Louis obviously bites the dust and gets sucked off by Saturn, as I say earlier. But I thought it was
Top by the ring.
You just
Yeah.
wanted to say that again, didn't you?
Why not?
Yeah, films, I do like films with ambitious looking special effects, and this is definitely a film like that. Although I said it could have been like a good early 1970s movie of the week. Similarly, I'd like to see this at the cinema because of its special effects and see what they look like on on a proper big screen.
Very much made to be shown on a huge screen because it was meant to be shown really on the Cinerama, was it?
Cinerama? Oh, is that true? I didn't know about that.
It was like an early IMAX type sort of dome screen.
Yeah, it's like a curved screen.
It didn't quite take off. Obviously, later on we got the IMAX screens, but it was very, very much shot with the intention of being shown on them. But unfortunately, it went the way of the multiplex, didn't it? The small screens, and this film didn't benefit from that, I don't think.
No.
This film, I suppose, like quite a few 70s films, it's got long periods of silence, hasn't it? Because if you think about it, it's like after 20 minutes, you've got 70 minutes left of the film, and he's on his own at that point, apart from the limbless guys in the robots. But he is on his own. He's on his own for the next 70 minutes, and it's a lot of soliloquy, isn't it? A lot of him, his own monologue and his own.
His only companions are the drones. I think I remember watching it as a kid and sort of just waiting for these. All I remember is the drones. Really, I was just waiting for the drones to come back on, because they kind of have a little character all of their own, don't they? They tap in the foot as they're waiting.
Yeah, I like that scene. I noticed that and I thought that's funny. That's good because it's just the kind of touch I don't think they'd bother with in many films. There's the robot would be the thing, but to have one tapping his foot impatiently, I thought it was really funny.
The bit where Huey's being operated on and the other one's looking on, and I think he tells the robot to go and get him something, but he's not shifting, he's just staying watching his pal, which I think at the end of the movie, when he does send Dewey off on his own, I think it's quite cruel that he doesn't send Huey as well.
It doesn't make sense because he's going to blow it. He's going to commit suicide anyway. So why not give the other robot a chance and put them?
It's a bit cruel.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But I suppose if he is, the argument could be if he's already lost his mind, he's not thinking straight, and at this point, he's killed 3 humans for the first time, and it's just and he's been living with robots for weeks. So
that could mess with your head. Yeah, anybody's head, because there's that bit where the control, is it the Berkshire, the other ship, manages to track him down, and he hears control coming through, and he kind of thinks he's hearing the voice, doesn't he? He's staring at the radio for ages, and he's not realizing what's happening. So he's obviously in like a really confused state.
He's almost in like a kind of a trance. He's not able to kind of respond at first. He responds really quietly, doesn't he?
Maybe he was growing some wacky on the ship, maybe possibly.
I mean, that's the character anyway, because Lowell has already lost the inability to communicate, hasn't he? Because he's so argumentative, he just can't have. He doesn't have that human. Maybe that's the part of one of the storylines. I don't know. One of the ideas he wants to get across. He's more in tune with the robots. His day-to-day tasks of tending the garden and returning to sleep and eating. Rather than the humans on ship who still they still have bits of banter, don't they? They still have a laugh and they still play pool and they're still very much into touch with Earth and humanity. And he's already given up on Earth. He's like, no. He just is. He's a gardener, and that's what he does. He just tends his garden, returns home, and that's. He's also. There's also the big thing in it. He's the only person on the ship who eats organic food, isn't he? The rest of the guys, they're eating this like processed stuff, which is supposed. Well, he says that it's tasteless, and it's it has no. You know, what's his? It's something he's grown, isn't it? What's he eating?
I think it's a melon. Yeah, they kind of saying, "Oh, you're there with your stinky melon," and I think one of them sort of bullies him and sort of said, "Oh, I'll just take a slice of melon," and then he absolutely flips, doesn't he? He's quite protective over his produce.
He is like a vegan warrior in a way, isn't it? You can imagine like being tucked to a beef eater and just going crazy.
I wonder how far-sighted this film was back in 1971. I wonder if there were people. I'm from Hollywood, California. I guess there might have been this kind of movement, but generally speaking, were there people around who were kind of so well informed about how industrialization of the world and
I think so.
Pollution of the planet and how it's quite so damaging. I mean, this film's nearly 60 years old. No, sorry, check my maths. 50 odd years old.
Vietnam was obviously underway still in 72, so there was all that Agent Orange, Dow Chemical, and obviously Agent Orange was controversial. It was completely ruining the forest.
Donald Trump, Agent Orange.
And I think even Douglas Trumbull got Dow Chemical to donate a lot of the chemicals for the special effects that they needed to create them as a goodwill exercise, as a PR exercise, because they were trying to rebuild their reputation at the time. But I think, very much the environmental movement had started in the early 60s, hadn't it, with the flower power. And,
I read that there was quite a bit of product placement in it, but I didn't really notice. It's not, like last week when we did Over the Top, that's full of it. But
the containers, isn't it, on the racetrack? It was a disused aircraft carrier, I think, where they filmed it, wasn't they? So there must have been one of the upper decks or something, the loading bay maybe, where they built the racetrack. Yeah. So it was decommissioned. It was actually called the Valley Forge, which is what this spacecraft was named after. And they had full reign of use of the aircraft carrier as long as they didn't have to return it to how it was, but as long as they didn't take any metal from the ship, they were okay to do whatever they wanted with it. Right?
It's a dying thing, I suppose, in modern cinema, but you could say there was no interference you could see with the script, was there? Because you can see that there really are these long, protracted sequences, which there's no way in a modern, big budget. I know it wasn't mega budget, but it was still sizable. A big budget film there's no way they'd allow that to happen.
There's no way the iPhone generation would not hold their attention, would it? For sure, yeah. Staring at Bruce Dern's face and his sort of tortured expression would not hold the Apple generation.
He's sweaty. He's quite sweaty as well. I mean, going back to sweat, he's got a sweaty face, and he's quite how old was he then? Because he's still quite saggy face, isn't he? Even for a young guy.
He's about 80 now, is he? Is he about 80 years old at the moment?
Yeah, so how old would he have been then? If 50 years old, so he was about late 20s when he did that, maybe, I don't know.
The earliest film I've seen him in, I think he was in Hang 'em High with Clint Eastwood. He's a villain in that. And that's 1968, so that was probably, a few years before. I'm not sure how old he is. I mean, the most recent thing I've seen Bruce Dern is, and he's in loads of films. Yeah, he's in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Tarantino's other film, was it Hateful Eight? He's in that one as well. Let's have a look. He's 84, apparently, at the moment.
Okay.
Is he the old perv who's got a young woman? He's like a blind man.
That's right. That one? Yeah. They've all taken over his house, haven't they?
Yeah, the hippies are using him, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. That's the last. I think that's the last thing I've seen him in. He's probably been making films beside that one. He's been very prolific throughout his career. Crops up in all sorts.
I was reading the criticisms, and there's a lot of people, suggesting that he really overacts. But I think he's supposed to. I think he's been instructed to do that, and I think he's playing it that way.
And the thing is with Dern as well. If you look at any of his other film roles, he never plays it low key. He's not a low key actor. He's always kind of on the edge and twitchy. He's kind of like Jack Nicholson, I suppose, in some way. You're expecting a certain kind of performance when you employ Bruce Dern. And funnily enough, I think this is probably one of the only films where he's got a lead role. He's kind of the attention's on him for most of the film, really.
That's it. It's him and three robots, isn't it? So he's got to carry the film to a certain.
Yeah, he's got to have some presence to carry that off. And there was something I read where he said he was kind of like the 17th or so person asked to be in the film after everyone else had kind of said no to it. So I don't know if this film was a
Yeah.
lucky break for him or not, but it's certainly one of the roles he'll be remembered for.
Apparently, Larry Hagman was quite close. I think Douglas Trumbull went to his house and they had a hot tub night where because the robe apparently was inspired. That the iconic robe that Bruce
Oh,
Dern
yeah,
wears
yeah.
in it was inspired by
Like
the
the
kind of hot
dude.
tubs that you would get in the 60s, where you'd go out
Mm.
under the stars and you'd probably smoke a joint and take in the view. So apparently he was quite close to getting the role.
I think that was the hard thing for me because I didn't, obviously I've appreciated him in other things, but in this, I wasn't enjoying him as the lead. I actually felt more attached to some of the other guys he bumped off in the first 20 minutes.
He's not an easy character to like, is he? Yeah, he's not an easy character to warm to, I suppose. A bit of an anti-hero, isn't he? Yeah.
70 minutes of his sweaty, wobbly face.
It's very different watching it as an adult, kind of watch it with a more critical eye, and you see the plot holes, as you've mentioned, but still you have that memory of the emotion that it caused you as a kid. Kind of like seeing E.T. die. There's 3 murders, there's a suicide, and 2 of the drones get destroyed, and the other one's left on his own for eternity. So it's quite a dark film for a kid to see.
But I don't know about you, but I did see, mentioning E.T., I saw that recently. And I didn't twitch once at the E.T. falling pale and sick. And even when Drew Barrymore goes like, E.T.'s there, and I
Rob, you're
felt
so
nothing.
hard. You're so hard, Rob.
I read that George Lucas told Drew Barrymore that was a real alien, and she that's why she took it so hard. Or
She
something.
was, well, allegedly, we have to say alleged, but allegedly she was starting her journey in substances from a very early age.
Yeah, DT's photo.
Yeah. E.T.'s got some great crack. No, there's none of that.
He's a drug dealing alien. That was the original script.
I want to see that film, don't you? And basically, when he comes on his ship, he's got to sell his supply quick and then get back on his ship.
Where's Barrymore? And then he can get rid of it all then in one go.
Sell crack.
So, Lee, you said this is a film that holds a great deal of kind of nostalgia for you, having seen it on TV quite a few times.
Yeah.
I must say this is the first time I've seen it. Although I've been aware of this film, kind of as a film that exists. But I remember missing it once many years ago because it formed part of on BBC Two in the early 90s. There was a program called a Movie Drone, which was presented by Alex Cox, the director of Repo Man, Walker, and a few other films here and there. He's a talented guy. And every week he'd come on and present like Django or some spaghetti western, and really that program was like my introduction to what you call kind of really kind of weird oddball cinema, which has kind of stayed with me ever since really. And this was one film that he put on in that season where I think for whatever reason one week I missed it. I remember seeing it later on because I had his movie drum guide. And he'd done a little write-up for Silent Running, and I thought, I must watch that at some point. I must check it out. And for some reason, just always eluded me. So my kind of memory of it, having not seen it, is just that. And I think this is kind of the perfect film for Alex Cox's Movie Drone. It's 90 minutes. It's got some really interesting ideas, interesting crew, special effects are kind of notable and noteworthy, and it's for me it sits perfectly. It's a good choice for in that kind of company as part of Alex Cox's Movie Drone from many years ago.
Yeah, during that season as well. I remember because I saw the film Demon Seed at that time, which has also got it's got connections to 2001 because it's got a creepy. It's an automated house. It's also a similar message about automation. An automated house which decides to impregnate the lady that's trapped in the house to create like this future evolved species of half machine, half human. And that
voiced by Robert Vaughn.
It's so creepy.
Voiced by Robert Vaughn as Proteus.
Yeah, Proteus. That's it. Yeah, and that was. Yeah, and it's so that's probably got connections to this as well. Yeah,
definitely.
I mean, there was talk apparently of doing a remake or a sequel, but apparently the idea was behind they tried to track down the original dome, but I'm not too sure how you would do a sequel. Really, maybe remake. It'd be interesting to remake it with a bigger budget and maybe have that alien encounter that we were planning on.
Perhaps, yeah, according to the original script, with the money and the effects that have got available now, perhaps that would be.
Imagine that if they'd done an alien encounter and beaten the alien to the punch, and done it just as well. How different this film would be now.
It did influence Alien, apparently, because it was the first time we'd seen a really grimy-looking ship, isn't it? It's got rivets everywhere. Obviously, it's an aircraft carrier, so previous to that, every starship looked kind of like Star Trek. It looked very pristine and very sterile, and even the crew members are a bit like the Aliens crew, where they're not NASA types, are they? They're just average Joes. So it kind of did influence Alien in a way. And even that bit where the monitor goes to static when Louis gets killed, you can see in the later Aliens films when the soldiers get killed, it kind of goes to static, doesn't it, when they lose a soldier? So
definite influences, certainly. And I think the thing you mentioned as well, the thing about the space vehicles and areas looking kind of worn and oily and grimy, that was definitely an idea that was carried through to Star Wars. Where you can see the battleships are all kind of grimy, and also in Battlestar Galactica, they kind of carried that idea through as well, which came not long after.
Yeah, because that's the laughable about 50s B movies and 60s, that they're all wearing these very clean looking clothes with A-line clothing, aren't they, and giant shoulder pads and stuff.
That's right. They've just got some Calgon in the wash for the spacesuits and got rid of all those stains.
Instead of realizing what a spaceship would be, which is like an industrial, factory in the sky.
Yeah.
That's what it would be. It would be a workplace. Yeah.
So what's it gonna be, boys? Does this one rot in the morgue or make it on the helicopter to freedom?
So, are we going to talk about
the morgue?
The morgue, yeah, because I think we should go around the robin, because should we save you for last, Lee? I'll go first.
Go.
Give Lee deciding vote.
Because that's only fair. Because if you have listened to us a few times, we've decided to be quite fair with the films. We've decided to go round robin, like choosing films. So this is Lee's film this week, and so actually, I'll go on about my decision about the morgue. So I do want to keep it in the morgue. I only for the sense that, but I felt really guilty about keeping the morgue, because when somebody cherishes the film and somebody who's a good friend, you want to preserve it. But I just couldn't. I'd literally, after the first 20 so minutes, I was really struggling with it, and I don't know whether it's maybe, like you said, maybe I'm an iPhone generation now. Maybe I need quick stimulus and input more often, and most of the things I watch, like Mandalorian and stuff like, there's so much happening on the screen in every 5 seconds. But there was long sequences in this, and I never warmed to the character, Lal, and the stupidity of his decisions, and the pseudoscience in it, and maybe the heavy-handed message as well about
Joan Baez.
Yeah, and Joan Baez as well.
And she comes up at the end with a second song, doesn't she?
I could have killed her at that point. And that feeling of emptiness when a film ends, and you think. So the film ended, and I was actually breathless with like how frustrated I was. Just like almost like I've been on a date with like somebody I really fancy, but then
this is a payback for Halloween 3, Rob, for making me sit through that.
I got on a date with someone really fancy, but then we never, she teased second base, but it never happened. And I don't think he even hit. I know I did hit first base when Lal was killing his crewmates, and but then I just. But I'm glad that. But I suppose it's one of those films. It's a part of a canon. It's a necessary film to take place, and I like the fact is that these guys just went out there and did this film, and did it almost like guerrilla style in a sense, and handled all these things, first time writers and special effects and everything, and it stands up in that sense. But definitely for me, it's maybe because of like the impact of the film. It's just leaving the zombie apocalypse on the helicopter, but then the helicopter definitely gets shot down by Lowell with the nuclear warhead, and it just crumbles, and that's it, and you have to burn. So that's so sorry for me. It's a morgue.
Okay, Carlos, do you want to go next?
I think, yeah, thank you. It's well, for me, this, as I said earlier, this film is perfect movie drone material. I don't think it's a classic. It's got some really interesting ideas, and it is. I find it quite interesting to see someone like Bruce Dern, who's basically a character actor for the most part, take the lead role in this particular film. He does chew up the scenery a little bit, but I quite enjoy Bruce Dern in most of the things that he's in. And he's normally a villain, of course, where his twitching is mostly, maybe a bit more appreciated. But I like the effects. I did like the miniatures, even though you could kind of tell there were miniatures in places. I enjoyed the kind of artistry behind it. And when the film, I thought it clocked in a nice 90 odd minutes. It wasn't like 2001 where, it takes whatever it is, 2.5 hours to kind of get have its events unfold. Good tightly packed 90 minutes. Historically, it's an important science fiction film. And so, yeah, it was a first watch for me, and I liked it. I don't think it's I know some people really. I know I don't know what you're going to say, Lee, but I know that some people hold it in really high regard. Filmmakers and critics alike. I wouldn't say I would. I'm not sure if I go that far with Silent Running, but I'd certainly give it. It's an important film, and I think it's perfect. Yeah, perfect movie drone material. So I think what I'm going to do with Silent Running is I'm going to send it away on the final dome with is it Huey? Who's the one that's left? Is it Huey, the one that
Dewey is the one in the dome, yeah.
Dewey. I'm going to send it away with Dewey for all of eternity, just to kind of float away in space.
It's going to perish eventually.
Eventually, it will perish, but I think it's more than interesting enough to warrant not be. I can't put it in the morgue. I can't. It's too good for that. It's too good for that.
Thanks for that, Carl. Well, I would say, obviously, I would argue it probably is a classic because of its influence, as you say, historical influence on the future films of Aliens and even Red Dwarf. I think the director of Red Dwarf said it was an influence for that.
Sure.
It was. I think some people have said it's like a special effects movie, but I think it's more a humanity movie. It's a movie of emotions, really, and it's this. For me, it has to escape from the morgue because little Lee back in 1985 was probably 6 feet away from his old square CRT TV, waiting probably for just the drones to come back on the TV. Probably only engrossed by the bits where the drones were on there. And you've got to remember this was just after Star Wars, and I was obviously really thirsty for any more kind of sci-fi films that featured drones. So it did hit me pretty hard at the time, and even rewatching it as a 43-year-old adult, I still had a little sort of tear in my eye, in the corner of my eye, sort of watching it at the end as the rather morose, melancholic music plays.
Conjunctivitis.
Yeah, it was just allergies. Yeah, it was nothing really.
Lee, I can understand why people like it. I can. I mean, personally, I wouldn't rank it as a classic, but I can understand why people would watch it and really take to it and really kind of feel empathy with it.
Mark Kermode, a big film critic in the UK, has quite a big platform out there, his own TV shows and things, and he rates it as his second favourite film of all time. Now, I wouldn't say that go quite that far. You think he ranks Exorcist first, and then
he loves Exorcist.
That's his favourite.
And I think he rewatches Silent Running nearly every 7 or 8 months. I think he says, well, not quite that far, but it is a film that I revisit every 10 years, and I kind of get something very different from it every time. Obviously, as an adult, I do see some of the plot holes and I get some of the criticism, but I think for me, it will be a film that I revisit when I'm in my 50s again, and just keep watching it to the very end, really. So for me, it escapes. Maybe the droids escape the morgue, and maybe Bruce stays in the morgue.
So when you said you're going to watch it to the very end, so on your deathbed, like all your loved ones around your bed, and you say, "Just get out of the room,
Yeah.
put silent running on now."
Give me a nuclear bomb, and I'm gonna end it quick. Yeah.
Lee and Rob, I saw this on Amazon Prime last night. Again, it was the first watch for me. But Lee, you've got a very interesting release of this film.
The distributor is Eureka, and it's a V8. A lot of the newer Blu-rays now are doing this VHS styling on the box. It's got a couple of postcards in there, nice poster, lots of extras on the Blu-ray. The making of an interview with the director, and yeah, well worth picking up. I think it was only 13 quid, which was a bit of a bargain, really. So yeah, check
It's
it
a
out.
nice looking edition, isn't it? And if you're someone who's kind of into the way all VHS boxes used to look, I think it's definitely a nice little thing to have on your shelf. And of course, you're buying physical media as well, so you kind of got it for all time there in a nice restored edition.
That's it.
And I believe apart from that UK edition, I think Silent Running's being released in the USA and Canada. So if you're listening in the USA and Canada, I think Arrow Video, which is a UK company, but they put some titles out in the States as well, stateside. They've got a brand new spanking edition of this. I think it's a 4K scan, which is coming out in November. Lee, do you know the date for this?
No, I just know it's November.
It's out in November.
I didn't know it was a 4K scan. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it should look even better than it's looked before. So yeah, keep an eye out for that one. And I think it's probably going to be one of those that will sell out fairly quickly. So if you want a copy,
another thing to mention is apparently a band. I don't know the name of the band off the top of my head, but they've redone the soundtrack for the movie. And I think there was talk of the band. I don't know if this has happened or not, but there was talk of the band doing a live performance while screening the film. So they've rewritten the complete soundtrack. Whether it's any good or not, I don't know, but it'd be worth checking out.
I'll have a look for that later. Yeah. Now, Lee, it's November. I'm just reminded. How are things going with our competition?
Well, I think we said we were going to run it until the 27th of November, and the Blu-ray, the 4K UHD is released, and then we will pick a winner. So you've still got a chance to win it. Yeah, go to our Twitter account, and it's a pinned tweet. You can enter the competition.
Yeah,
still got a chance.
You can also do it on the Instagram. So basically, same competition. It's to win the Bill and Ted free. So you just go into the Instagram account. It's Manchester Movie Morgue, and just retweet, post, sign up, let me know you enter in the contest, and you're in the draw. It's as simple as that.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, because it feels like we've had this competition running since is that episode 3. So it feels like forever, but I guess it's coming to an end now. So guys, there's still time, and we'll send out a copy of the 4K UHD for after the 27th. So get your name in the hat, give us a listen, and you might be in with a chance. And also listen to episode 3 if you haven't done so already.
Yeah, it's a good one. Okay, well, thanks for listening, everybody, and goodbye from me.
Thanks so much, and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.